Now we will discuss poverty. Let us discuss, sociology of poverty, right? Okay. All poverty line, below poverty line, APL, BPL committees reports you study, I guess, in economics, right? वहाँ पढ़िएगा. Either we will do, social analysis of causality, causes of poverty, right? And what is poverty? How do we define poverty? Poverty को कैसे define करते हैं? हाँ, yes, lack of basic amenities कह सकते हैं, या it's a level of poverty is a level of living, right, which is not sufficient or which inhibits, physical, social, cultural, economic development of individuals or growth, right? It's level of living, it's living condition, isn't it, which inhibits the physical, mental, social, cultural, educational, right, development of individuals or group, referred as poverty, a state of poverty or condition of poverty, right? Look, as I told you, terms related with you will study in economics. Here we will discuss, social factors behind poverty, right? Social causes behind poverty, right? Socio-historical causes and other social factors, right? Responsible for poverty in Indian society, right? When we trace causality on temporal scale, we realize that there are many historical factors, right? There are many historical factors responsible for poverty in modern Indian society, or socio-historical factors, you can say, responsible for poverty in modern Indian society, right? For example, British intervention, right? Interventions during British rule, right? British rule or British Indian society is characterized by low productivity, right? Low productivity, low output, right? In society. Through their, policies, like their policies, land revenue system, right? I guess you are aware of land revenue system introduced by Britishers, right? Jamindari system, Mahalwari system, and Rayatwari system. All these three systems, Jamindari, Mahalwari, and Rayatwari, were exploitative in nature. For example, if you compare these three systems, you will find Jamindari more exploitative in nature, right? Jamindari system more exploitative in nature, right? Because of high taxation, right? And in Jamindari regions, in Jamindari areas, land right was overnight transferred to Jamindars from the tenants, isn't it? From the real tillers, right? So this Jamindari, right? Jamindari ka system pauperized the masses because of high taxation and no intervention for agricultural growth and development. अगर आप pre-British period में आप देखें, तो though taxation system was there, but timely interventions were also there by the state, right? आप मुगल period में देख लीजिए, आप सल्तनत period में देख लीजिए, फिरोज शाह तुगलक and all, right? You will find intervention, irrigation, construction of irrigation, canals and all, right? Interventions were there, isn't it? But Britishers, commodified land, made land a commodity to be sold in the market, isn't it? Transferred land rights in name of Jamindars, right? Tillers remained, became landless tenants. The original tillers, owners became landless tenants and dependent on their own resources, no governmental intervention, no state intervention, and that with heavy taxation, extraction of tax, isn't it? That in due course of time pauperized the masses in Jamindari areas, isn't it? Even in other areas like Mahalwari and Rayatwari regions also, the condition of farmers, the tillers was not good. In due course of time, pauperization. Similarly, in urban settlements, the mercantile policy, कई बार हमने discuss कर लिया उसकी mercantile policy. Mercantile policy, caused deindustrialization. The traditional karkhanas, isn't it, right, failed to compete with the British finished goods. The goods produced in karkhanas failed to compete with British imported finished goods, isn't it? And that caused destruction of those karkhanas, right? And proletarization of the artisan and craftsman class, proletarization and pauperization of artisan craftsman class. जो artisan थे, craftsmen थे, owners of karkhanas थे, they became they became workers, proletariat, workers, isn't it? And they were pauperized, they became poorer because of destruction of their commerce, right? Their manufacturing, artisan, craftsmen, and their commerce, their trade and commerce, right? Pauperization. So this is one factor. I mean, we refer British rule and British policies a factor, right? Particularly we see some communities and groups, right, were more affected, right, during British period, like rural communities, right? They were more affected by British period because of high land revenue, high taxation takes from land, right? Minorities were affected, pauperized, right? Because minorities who were a ruling class, isn't it, who had participation in administration, in government, in courts, in army, isn't it, right? They were pauperized, they were excluded during British period and pauperized. Tribals, right? British forceful intervention in tribal areas, right, caused land alienation among tribals. Tribals were alienated from their land, from their forest. They were excluded, right? They were pauperized, they were subjected to exploitation by the outsiders, who are referred sociologically as decouge, by outsiders, by decouge, right? They were exploited by moneylenders, by police, by administrators, isn't it, right? By industrialists and factory owners, those who established mining industry in tribal belts, right? Like pauperization of the tribals, exclusion of the tribals, their pauperization and exploitation started during British period, right? So these we count as historical factors, right, for pauperization, right, poverty in Indian society, right? Okay. Next, during British period, अगर आप ऑब्जेक्टिफाई करेंगे तो लो कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन एक निकल के आएगा, बिकॉज हाई टैक्सेशन, टैक्स बहुत ज्यादा था रूरल एरियाज में, राइट? इधर डिकंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ इंडस्ट्रीज, their profit motive and profit orientation was very high in mercantilism, taxes were very high, isn't it? So low capital formation, right? And that resulted in poverty, right? Unemployment because of destruction of karkhanas, as well as destruction of traditional land systems. Unemployment, right? Increased unemployment. Pressure of population on available resources increased. Pressure of population also increased on available resources because of lack of economic differentiation, right? Economic differentiation तब होता जब industrialization would have been there, right from the beginning. लेकिन यहाँ पे industrialization कब से शुरू हुआ? जो indigenous, right, Indian स्वदेशी movement and onward. उसके पहले क्या था? All destruction and focus on finished imported goods, isn't it? Goods के imports पे focus was there of Britishers, isn't it? Okay, so these were factors. ये सब factors थे, historical factors we count, right? Causal factors for pauperization, right? Okay. Post-independence politico-administrative factors, what we see कि Britishers were focused on selective intervention. जैसे Britishers, they created infrastructure, but in select areas. Economic growth and development. For economic growth and development, they also created infrastructure, but in select areas. In coastal regions, they developed port towns, port cities, isn't it? They were not interested in developing countryside, isn't it? Countryside or rural areas, right? Continental areas only focus on coastal areas. Post-independence also, by default, right? Planners focused on selective intervention for economic growth and development. Planners focused on selective intervention for economic growth and development, right? Pre-British, all administrative factors behind pauperization, political factors behind pauperization, their intervention. Post-intervention also we will count, administrative, political and administrative intervention which caused pauperization and poverty. So post independence में it was the responsibility of the government, right, to ensure equal growth and development of all regions, all groups, all communities, right. But by default, government followed selective intervention policy. Economics में आपने पढ़ा होगा selective intervention policy, आप पढ़ेंगे मेंस में. तो selective intervention policy is reflected in government's intervention in select areas, be that agriculture development or industrial development, right. जैसे select areas में ग्रीन रिवोल्यूशंस, राइट. पहले भी मैंने आपको बोला था कि ग्रीन रिवोल्यूशन वाज रिजल्ट ऑफ टू प्रोग्राम्स, राइट, और interventions by the government for agricultural growth and development, right. IAAP, intensive agriculture area program, intensive agriculture area program, and IADP, intensive area development program, IADP. These two programs resulted into phenomenal change, right, phenomenal change in production and productivity in select areas of India or in select regions of India, right. Select regions like Haryana, Punjab, some districts of Maharashtra, Madras, right, select district, not pan India intervention, right. And एक ये ध्यान रखिएगा, second कि government failed, right, government of the day, state machinery failed in intervening in the most exploited and pauperized areas immediately after independence. The most pauperized areas were zamindari areas, right. Bihar, Odisha, West Bengal, Eastern UP ka areas. These areas were pauperized areas because here zamindari system was introduced, and zamindari mein there was highest extraction tha zamindari regions mein. Taxation was very high, tax rate was very high, 10/11. 11 part ka 10 part was taken as tax by the zamindars for the British, right. So these areas were pauperized, and after independence in late 60s, government intervened for agricultural growth and development in form of IADP and IAAP in select areas of India, right.
Why was zamindari not introduced in South India? It was to also a fertile land, Madras presidency and all that.
हाँ,
Only in UP and Bihar.
ये तो ये हिस्ट्री टीचर आपको बताएंगे, लेकिन मैं भी इस पे थोड़ा सा इंसाइट आपको दे दूं. एक तो प्रोविंसेस लाइक ब्रिटिश प्रोविंसेस, मद्रास ब्रिटिश प्रोविंस था, राइट. और British were very conscious in creating regional gulf, regional disparity, regional inequality. As I told you, post 1857, every policy of British, right, in fact, most of the policies of British, right, that also had, one component, and that component was to create divide. Britishers introduced zamindari in the most fertile regions of India. The most fertile regions, the regions where empires were built up, right? Mauryan Empire, Magad Empire, right? Because of its fertility, lower Gangetic plains, right? Aapka UP, right? Eastern UP, Bihar, West Bengal. These are areas of lower Gangetic plain and fertile agriculturally. There they focused on extracting the maximum, right? To mobilize their resources, isn't it? And they selectively focused in coastal regions. They created port areas. They focused in educational development to have, educated, trained, skilled workers to work in their administration as well as at their ports, isn't it? And those areas were suitable for their movement also, right? Movements, right? To connect from Britain through seawage, right? Right. So ये factors, ये important factor था. And their purpose was also solve divide, gulf inequality, economic inequality between zamindari and other regions, isn't it? Those regions became, supplier of labor, cheap labor. Getting a point, right? Okay. Post-independence also, like the government interventions were selective in nature, focused in select areas, right? Not on all areas equally, isn't it? In fact, in select areas also, where IADP and IAAP was, implemented, in those areas also, these development programs had limited, impact on poverty alleviation. In fact, these programs, caused further land alienation, right? Just say Green Revolution, IAAP and IADP. In these programs, there was, provision for consolidation of land, right? And during land consolidation, a small and marginal farmers lost their land to big farmers. Government intervened for consolidation, and in due course of consolidation, land consolidation, a small and marginal farmers lost their land to big farmers, right? So land alienation took place in a small and marginal farmers. Because of heavy mechanization or use of machines, wage laborers, agricultural laborers lost their work and their wages to machines. Their work was taken by machines, right? So agriculture laborers were pauperized, right? After Green Revolution, as well as, small and marginal farmers were pauperized, right? The dissent, discontent, right? The unrest of these pauperized groups after independence in Green Revolution belt like Haryana, Punjab manifested in form of, Khalistan movement, right? One factor in studies of Home Ministry also, कि Khalistan movement का one factor was dysfunctional consequences of Green Revolution, and dysfunctional consequences of Green Revolution was, one of the dysfunctional consequences of Green Revolution was कि large mass of population became unemployed, isn't it? And after post Green Revolution, government had failed in creating alternative infrastructure for employment also, right? In 70s, जब वहां पे Khalistan movement started, then government focused on creating, transport and communication facilities and developing infrastructure, right? So udhar bhi post independence bhi, by default, the selective intervention policy of the government did not solve the problem of poverty and pauperization, but in fact, in some cases, increased pauperization and poverty, right? Post independence industrialization was opted or planned, right? Second planning mein industrialization started, and industrialization was, taken as a means for economic growth and development, right? Under Mahalanobis Nehru model, right, it was believed that these growth poles, right, poles of, growth and development, from these poles of growth and development, means industrialized areas, benefits will trickle down in other areas. Benefits will trickle down. That trickle down theory, isn't it, was advocated by Mahalanobis, and selective industrialization started. But in reality, what happened, because of a strategic position of the castes, higher caste and class, the benefits from those industries were cornered by few. Benefits could not trickle down among the poorest sections of society. For example, आप में से कोई ओडिशा से आते हैं? ओडिशा नहीं, हाँ नहीं, झारखंड, अच्छा, छत्तीसगढ़, हाँ ठीक है. In these areas, what you will see, though there are industrialized patches, right, industrialized poles, right? For example, in Odisha, Koraput region, Koraput mein there is one industry, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited was established. Koraput is tribal area, tribal belt, and one of the, on World Hunger Map, Koraput represents India, right? On World Hunger Map, Koraput represents India. Koraput, Kalahandi, Bogaigaon, right? और सब ये सब जो regions सब है ना, ये सब hunger stricken regions, right? Like HL was established there, it was expected that benefits from Hindustan Aeronautics Limited growth and development will trickle down, and that will benefit to the surrounding tribals. Tribals also will be benefited. But what happened? The benefits were cornered by the few, select few, right? And that is the case Bokaro, Durgapur, Bhilai. If you go to Bhilai, you will find surrounding areas of Bhilai still tribals are, pauperized. And in fact, after there was a small study of mine in Bhilai, right? I realized in Bhilai, after this establishment of that SAIL, क्या है वहाँ पे? SAIL, right? Steel Authority of India Limited, right? Tribal land alienation increased, right? Because those who retires, like high officials, those who retired, they buy land in surrounding area, and from whom? From tribals, right? I visited a farmer there. He was from Haryana. He was working in Bhilai, after retirement, he bought 50 acres of land, right? And he was Pradhan of that area, right? And the local tribals who owned that land earlier, they were his servants, right? Benefits could not trickle down. Benefits were cornered by, the select few, right? Those who were in a strategic position, class position, mein, educated lot, right? Educated lot. Benefits could not trickle down. You will find, Chhattisgarh is a state, particularly urban settlements, characterized by all migrant population. Jo Haryana, Bihar, UP, Punjab, migrant population. This migrant population migrated to corner the benefits of intervention. Locals were not benefited. If locals would have been benefited, they would not have joined Maoist and Naxalites in Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh. Right? Locals were not benefited. Their benefits were cornered by the Chalu Indians. Right? Government failed. Right? Government failed in protecting. Isn't it? Government thought, yeah, I'm developing, this growth pole, right? Development ka pole, and benefits will trickle down among all, right? And this will benefit the most to the tribals, isn't it? But tribals could not be benefited. Those benefits were cornered by the class, right? Class, the select few, right? So poverty continued. In fact, in due course of time, more people were pauperized, and result of pauperization is increased or increased influence of Maoism. ये pauperization जैसे जैसे हुआ वैसे वैसे Maoism and Naxalism has spread. Naxalism, which started in Naxalbari district, now spread in almost 220 districts, including most of the districts of Odisha, right, and many districts of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Telangana, right. Particularly Odisha case is unique, right? Tribals of Odisha were traditionally submissive tribe, not fighter tribes or martial tribes, submissive tribes. Like many tribes in India referred as martial tribes or fighter tribes. For example, Garcia, right? Garcia tribe, they are fighter tribe, but not Karnataka ka, Odisha ka tribe. Most of the Odisha tribes were submissive tribe, right? And they also, most of the districts of Odisha are now affected by Maoism, and tribes have become Maoist, right? Why? Because post LPG, post globalization, like earlier in first phase of industrialization in 60s and 70s, select industries were opened, right? Established, select industries were established in select areas. That could not benefit to the tribals, fine. That became non-functional for the tribals. But post LPG, after liberalization, privatization, globalization, many multinational corporation and national corporation rushed in these areas and established, their industrial units, right? In early 90s, in mid 90s, in late 90s. And in due course of industrialization after LPG, many tribal groups were displaced. Displacement after Vedanta, in Niamgiri Hills, right? Lakhs of tribes were displaced by Vedanta, isn't it? Right, in Niamgiri districts. And those displaced tribes, discontented because of their breakdown of their culture, right? Their art, their crafts, isn't it? Their kinship, right? Discontented, they joined Maoist, right? Maoist, Maave paunche unko, right? Influenced and Maoist. Like POSCO, displacement caused by POSCO, thousands of tribes. That's why Vedanta ka, plant was shut down. POSCO also not permitted to displace more number of people, isn't it? Because of rising, like, and even planning committee report also in year 2008, planning committee report. Google कीजिएगा तो report आ जाएगा. Google करिएगा planning committee report 2008. Planning committee report, accepted, right, on record, कि spread of Maoism from West Bengal to Jharkhand to Odisha and different parts of India has been there because of displacement of the tribals, right? Particularly, spread of Maoism in tribal areas was caused by displacement of tribals, right? And displacement after liberalization, privatization and globalization, right? Displacement pehle bhi hua, but limited displacement tha, isn't it? Right, in early years after independence, but mass displacement started after industrial revolution, LPG, right? Liberalization, privatization and globalization, which pauperized the tribals, right? And poverty increased, deprivation, exclusion increased. Getting your point, right? So we count as cause of poverty, ये सारे factors को we count as cause of poverty, right? ऐसा sense आपको NCERT books में भी मिलेगा. When you will refer poverty, तो you will find कि they count on these factors, right? Okay. That what I counted na, कि failure of green revolution, benefits could not, like green revolution did not benefit to all, but in fact green revolution caused pauperization of small and marginal farmers, right? Green revolution caused pauperization of wage laborers, agricultural laborers, right? और इसीलिए on record you will find nowhere mention in books and notes the government of India thinking to extend green revolution in non-green revolution belts because of its dysfunctional consequences in form of pauperization of some groups and communities, right? On record government ने कहीं नहीं कहा. There was only one report. M.S. Swaminathan, Farmers Commission ka head, he was during Vajpayee region. He only represented a paper before the government and demanded कि green revolution should be extended in other parts of India also. But government never on record accepted or propagated कि green revolution should be ways and methods of green revolution should be implemented in other parts also. In 2011, government started National Food Security Mission, where all provisions are there under that mission to take care of small and marginal farmers, right? Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, states were given autonomy, right, to plan as per their agroclimatic condition, as per their local condition, right, to minimize dysfunctional consequences. Green revolution has many dysfunctional consequences in form of pauperization and poverty also, right? That benefited only to big farmers, right? Big farmers, not to small and marginal farmers. Okay. किसका? Obviously, use of heavy mechanization. वही technology अब solution हो रहा है कि now government is subsidizing modification of agricultural technology. Government is providing subsidy for modification of agricultural technology. For whom? For a small and marginal farmers, right? A small and marginal farmers, isn't it? Government is now creating alternative employment opportunities for landless laborers, isn't it? Rural development program, MG Narega and all, to minimize discontent, isn't it? To provide employment opportunities and to minimize poverty, right? This sort of intervention government has taken in wake of negative consequences of green revolution and industrialization, heavy industrialization, right? Okay, now other socio-cultural factors, right? India, in Indian society, you will see कि poverty is institutionalized poverty. When I say institutionalized poverty, means poverty is institutionalized in its structure, a structure of caste structure. Poverty institutionalized in caste structure, right? In traditional Indian society, was stratified in different caste groups, right? Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and many other, intermediate caste, Shudraj, isn't it? Different caste groups, right? And this stratification ka system, right? Division of stratification of members of society in different caste group, in different status group, right? Also, right, defined their occupational position, occupational status, right? Occupation was also assigned within this structure, caste structure, right? For example, Shudraj, right? Outcast, right? So they were assigned all cleaning, sanitation activities, all impure tasks, isn't it? They had no right, they had no freedom, liberty to take clean vocations. Clean vocation bole to knowledge, education, or business, trade, right? They were not allowed to take this clean vocation, isn't it? In this caste ka structure, right? And in caste structure, there was institutionalized arrangement for exchange of goods and services, right? In Jajmani system, in Jajmani structure, right? Jajmani system was system of interdependence, occupational interdependence of lower castes, right? And lower landless caste and higher land owning castes, isn't it? So people from Jajman caste, common caste, landless caste, landless service caste, they had very limited scope to improve their, income, right, and realize their life chances. And this continued for centuries. They had very limited scope, right? High caste had all scope, right? Kshatriyas, Brahmins, they had a scope to realize life chances, chance of education, isn't it? Chance, food, nutrition, right? Employment, administration. They had, relatively better chance, isn't it? And the excluded castes, particularly lower landless castes, they had very limited scope to realize their life chances, restricted scope to realize their life chances, isn't it? Right. I mean, chance to get out of poverty was restricted, limited, isn't it? And that's why we say that traditional Indian society mein poverty was institutionalized in caste framework, right? This was, justified on the basis of belief in transcendence. Those who are born in particular caste, they had to take their caste-based occupation. There were caste assemblies. In case of, deviation, there were caste assemblies, caste ka panchayats, who used to punish the caste men in case of deviation, right? So for generation to generation, from generation to generation, those who belong to landless caste, right, they became landless, they became poor, isn't it? So we say that poverty was institutionalized in caste framework, right? अब chance होगा तभी तो ना कि you will get out of poverty when you have chance. अभी क्या है modern society में, present society में, democratic Indian society में, there are chances are available, isn't it? Chances are available, equal opportunity is there, right? Equal opportunity is there, but because of some legislative or administrative failures, right? Because of some legislative, administrative failures, this institutionalized poverty continued even after independence, right? ये तो traditional society में था. Even in modern society, because of legislative, because of administrative failures, institutionalized poverty institutionalized in caste system. इसमें तो कोई problem नहीं है कि traditional society में poverty was institutionalized in the caste system, isn't it? Like the service caste, the common caste, they were paid in kind, not in cash. Cash ka payment was not there, right? In villages, payment in kind, crops were paid, crops, isn't it? Right? And whenever need arised for cash, they used to take from the jajman, the land owning caste, right? And since they were paid in kind, they failed to return the cash, so they were indebted and bonded in relation, their labor relation, bondage labor, isn't it? Right? Indebtedness, bondage, all these were cause of poverty in traditional Indian society, right? Bondage labor system, वो भी discuss करूंगा मैं detail separately, bondage labor system. अब post independence में, right? Post independence India में this caste based inequalities were abolished, right? Caste based inequalities were abolished, right? Equality of opportunity was provided, right? Promised by constitution, isn't it? Provided by constitution. Jamindari system was abolished, right? Jo caste, like who were jamindars? Higher Bhumihar Brahman caste, jamindars. Brahman caste in, West Bengal, jamindars, isn't it? Jamindari system was abolished, right? Land Reform Act was passed, isn't it? Land Ceiling Act was passed, right? Tenancy Act was passed. But all these legislation, failed because of delay in their implementation by the state governments, respective state governments. For example, Bihar was a Jamindari state, right? Legislation, Jamindari Abolition Act was passed, Land Reform Act was passed, Land Ceiling Act was passed by the center. But Bihar did not implement till today Land Reform Act or Land Ceiling Act. So far, not implemented. Why? Because of a strategic position of the state politicians, right? First 40-50 years, state politics dominated by higher caste, Bhumihars or Brahmins or Rajputs. Like 90s, Lalu Yadav, 15 years, right? But Yadavs are also Jamindars in some regions of Bihar. Like BP Mandal, he was from Jamindar family. BP Mandal Commission, on the recommendation of OBC, were provided reservation. he belonged to Jamindar family, B.N. Mandal, Jamindar family. So because of, and they all Yadavs, they did not allow, the political party to implement land reform. आज भी बिहार में land reform नहीं हुआ. So those who were pauperized, who were poor, who were poor because of, this caste system, because of landlessness, they continued to remain, poor. Today also poverty is very high in Bihar because those legislation to abolish poverty could not be implemented, right? Administrative machinery failed in implementation of those legislation and poverty continues, pauperization continues. इसलिए बिहार से ईस्टर्न यूपी से इतना ज्यादा माइग्रेशन है because poverty is very high, deprivation is very high, survivalist migration is there. People migrate to survive, not for education, not for earning wealth, but to survive. Survivalist migration is there, isn't it? And that's why despite all resistance, you will find in Maharashtra, in Assam, and in other states, right, people continue to migrate from these regions because they have no other option than migrate to survive because poverty is still institutionalized. And who are those migrants? Mostly belonging to, scheduled caste, right? Scheduled caste, right? Lower caste, landless caste. Those who has no livelihood, alternative, opportunities for livelihood. So they are bound to migrate, isn't it? They are still, poor, pauperized. Getting your point? So this is also one factor, right? Traditional society में caste-based poverty, those belonging to lower caste, poor, isn't it? Post-independence because of, failure of legislative interventions, administrative apathy, isn't it? In bureaucracy also, the strategic position was of landlord castes in early years after independence, who were represented in bureaucracy, right? Westernized, higher caste, landlord castes. They were apathetic in implementation of this land reforms, isn't it? And because of that, poverty continues, pauperization continues, right? Right. Okay. अभी क्या देख रहे हैं कि in fact, after liberalization, privatization, and globalization, with retrieval of the governments from welfare, stance or their welfare responsibilities, right? Just a subsidy is kind of welfare responsibility. Post LPG में, because of international commitments, governments, not only Indian government, the governments who became, part of global economy, they retrieved from their welfare responsibilities, right? There had been continuous decline in subsidies. ठीक है, subsidy पे, चाहे जो भी subsidy हो. In fact, government is now promoting give up, right? Give up campaign, कि subsidy छोड़िए, give up, right? And if you don't give up forcefully, they will let you give up, right? Right. So post-independence India में what we have seen, pauperization का, समझिए कारण, becoming poor. The agrarian communities who were benefited in 60s and 70s, for example, Jats, right? Marathas, who were benefited by Green Revolution, right? Post LPG in last 25 years, because of progressive decline, continuous decline of subsidies in agriculture, right? High or increase in agricultural production cost in agriculture, right? Increased infertility of land, right? Land salination, बहुत सारा कारण रहा, decrease in fertility of land, right? Further natural calamities, disasters, and lack of timely institutional support, isn't it? All these factors has caused pauperization of the first generation of dominant castes and classes after independence, right? Right, in Haryana, in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, and discontent and unrest among those caste groups, those classes who were benefited after independence through Green Revolution, whose fate decline after LPG, right? Other factors are also there. For example, land acquisition for infrastructure development by a state, highway ka construction and all, land acquisition, land fragmentation, disintegration of land, isn't it? Right? Recurrent, disaster, drought, flood, right? Like governments ka, like retrieval from that statutory rates, isn't it? like more and more exposure of agricultural commodities in the market driven rates and all, right? So all these factors, has pauperized the groups and communities, and that pauperization has caused descent, and that descent is manifesting in form of unrest, in form of demand for protective discrimination, Jats reservation, right? Marathas ka demand for reservation, right? है ना, mobilization, lakhs of Marathas were mobilized recently, gathered in Amravati for demand of reservation, right? Jats ka movement is continuing for last 1 month, peaceful movement. Last year there was violent movement, isn't it? Right? This is also indicative of pauperization, right? Communities have become relatively poorer. पहले क्या था? Absolute poverty था, right? Absolute poverty. Now relative poverty has increased after LPG. Relative poverty has increased after liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Relative poverty, increase in relative poverty, right? Right. So this also we will count contemporary, current wala area se, right? Okay. Other factors, और भी फैक्टर्स है पॉवर्टी में, क्या बोलिए कुछ, टेल मी. ओके, एक और फैक्टर जो इंपॉर्टेंट सोशल फैक्टर्स हम काउंट करते हैं, दैट इज कि पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस many interventions were made, right? Many interventions were made for poverty alleviation in form of poverty alleviation programs, rural development, right? But those programs, failed in increasing productivity, right, of the labor, isn't it? And income of the workers and laborers, right? Like poverty alleviation schemes started in year, मैंने printed notes में बहुत सारा, like earlier the first phase of interventions were oriented towards mere welfare of the community, welfare oriented approach, right? Mere subsistence, right? Mere rescue, right? I mean, government intervened, in other words, to just save the people from dying, you can say, right? Food for work program. अब food for what? Work. काम कीजिए, खाना खाइए, survive कीजिए, right? Food for work program, isn't it? Such interventions were made, right, in early years after independence. Poverty alleviation schemes, rural development programs did not increase the income of excluded sections, deprived sections, poor sections of the society substantially. There was no substantial increase in income through poverty alleviation schemes and rural development programs. Most of the schemes and programs, right, for poverty alleviation and rural development, right, were based on manual work, manual labor. Even MG Narega में क्या है? Provision only for manual work, not for concrete or use of technology. Manual work, right, which requires low skill or no skill, isn't it? Right. So what happened ki, since there was no substantial increase in income, so poverty continued, right? Government was focused on subsistence, poverty continued, right? Poverty, there is no substantial decrease. अब देखते हैं ना कि अभी भी some reports suggest 35%, some reports suggest 38%, 40%, even after and that is BPL, right? Government considers BPL कि भाई 38% population below poverty line are poor. But what about the 20% population above poverty line? 38 and 28 कितना हुआ? 20, 58. In fact, आप APL 30% को काउंट कर लीजिए, इसका हाल और खराब है. Farmers का committing suicide, right? 30% population, above APL, they are also, pauperized, right? This is the group which is committing, suicide. जैसे 20% को छोड़ दीजिए, वो तो पुअर ही है, लेबरर्स एंड ऑल. ये 20% के एबव वाला जो है 20 to 40%, they are committing suicide. Their condition, right, worsened after independence, right? Farmers committing suicide, tribals, joining Maoism, right? So what we see कि even after all interventions, poverty alleviation schemes, rural development program, there is no substantial decrease in poverty, right? ये जो decrease है ना कि भाई 50% से 38% or 35%, this is not substantial decrease. The people above poverty line, this 20% people also are in pauperized condition. ये भी pauperized condition में, right? ऐसा नहीं है कि their condition they have choices or life chances, isn't it? Like education, employment, right, available as per their choice, aisa nahi, right? Getting a point. तो एक ये भी फैक्टर मानते हैं, failure of, right, governmental interventions, poverty alleviation schemes, rural development programs, poverty alleviation schemes were merely focused on subsistence employment, right, survivalist employment, right, so could not substantially decrease poverty continued, right. Other factor we count, patriarchy is also a factor. Patriarchy, right, male's male's authority, particularly poverty among women, deprivation of women, right, and its cause of exploitation also, right. Like in society, poor women, this BPL women, poor women belonging to lower caste, excluded caste, right, those who are dependent on manual labor, right, those women exploited because of being women, right, and doubly exploited because of being poor women. Poverty is other cause of exploitation. Getting your point? Patriarchy, father-sarchy, male-sarchy. Women, landless women, for example, women from landless caste, landless groups, right, both men and women work in the fields of landlords, agriculture mein, isn't it? So they had to work, as well as they had to take care of familial responsibilities, right? So this is referred to doubly exploitation, right? In recent past, agar newspaper वगैरह पढ़ते होंगे, तो like there are many cases studies were reported from the state of Maharashtra, for example, Maratha region, कहते हैं ना मराठवाड़ा डिस्ट्रिक्ट का बात मैं बता रहा हूँ. Anybody from Maharashtra? You are. In Maharashtra, there was a case reported. There are increasing, trends towards polygynous marriages, right? Water wives, like marriage for fetching water. Families, are preferring for marriage, right? They are marrying, twice, thrice to fetch water, isn't it? Getting your point? In drought-prone areas, because of global warming, climate change, in drought-prone areas, this water wives का practice has started. अब ये क्या है? Triple exploitation. Climate change, triply exploiting women, becoming women, poor women, and now women in such areas where they are, considered just a means for collecting. Life का goal, lifetime what? Collecting water, collecting fodder, collecting woods, बस. Right? Child marriage का practice has started. Child marriage का in these areas, वो भी एक negative consequence है. In drought-prone areas, child marriage का practice has started for increasing membership, because more the members, more the survival, chances. More the members, more the survival chances. Getting a point, right? So yeah, like women, poverty among women, because of patriarchy and because of failure of planners, state machinery, governments in elevating poverty or empowerment of women. Failures. अभी जो government का focus देखेंगे कि today government is focused on empowering the groups, excluded groups and communities, empowerment of women, empowerment of minorities, empowerment of scheduled caste, empowerment of scheduled tribes, empowerment focus, welfare focused approach to empowerment focused approach, right, for poverty elevation, right? लेकिन ये empowerment focused approach, this shift you will witness, isn't it, in millennium decade, late 90s or millennium decade, we find a shift, right, from welfare to empowerment. This was not earlier. ये पहले नहीं था. This was not earlier. Getting your point. तो ये सब factors को also भी count. ये factors भी count करेंगे. हाँ एक ये भी factor. This is also right? Social problems may we count alcoholism, drug addiction, isn't it? Alcoholism, drug addiction, right? Also cause of, poverty, social problem, alcoholism, drug addiction, particularly in distressed communities, right? Distressed communities kaun hai? Distressed groups kaun hai? Those who are among whom poverty is institutionalized, right? This groups में poverty on the basis of, caste, institutionalized, landless caste, landless groups, they are, in those groups you will find high, intensity of alcoholism and drug addiction, and that further, intensifies poverty, right? Pauperizes the community, right? Obviously, like in modern society, for achievement of societal or cultural goals, right? आज क्या है cultural goal? Achievement of cultural goal. Today, society, promotes for achieving wealth, right? Wealth promotes for achieving, status, isn't it? Differential status, isn't it? Wealth, materialistic, things, house, car, and all. And for this, means is what? Means is merit, merit, education, right? Just those who are selected this year, qualified for interview, right? They have qualified on the basis of what? Merit. Merit के basis पे है ना? Merit के basis पे qualification. They qualified on the basis of their merit, right? Because merit education is means to achieve the position in society, the position of your choice, isn't it? If education is not available, so certainly the society, right, which provides to everyone equal choice to achieve, but if all members of society don't have equal, educational opportunities, right, skill and training opportunities in those societies, groups and communities will be deprived and excluded, and those who are deprived and excluded, poor, right? Education, my point here is that education is a means for achievement. Education is a means for social mobility. Education is a means for economic mobility, right? Income, wealth. And if society characterized by low rate of education, high intensity of illiteracy or educational disparity, in that society, exclusion and poverty is high. जैसे Indian society, right? Indian society में क्या है? We see, rural urban educational disparity, right? Tribe non-tribe educational disparity. Tribals are, unequal, right? Excluded. Men women educational disparity, right? Disparity between different regions of India, right? जैसे Bihar, Tamil Nadu, Bihar, UP, Kerala, disparity, huge disparities there, isn't it? And such disparity is cause of, poverty also, right? Exclusion and poverty also, educational disparity, right? Lack of, employment opportunities, right? And that because of low rate or slow rate of economic differentiation, right? Economic differentiation. For example, agriculture. We intervened for agricultural development, increase in productivity and production, but we failed in intervening for agriculture, growth and development of agriculture related allied activities, right? We failed in intervening for successive governments failed in intervening for agriculture related growth of agriculture related allied activities. तो इसको कहते हैं lack of economic differentiation, कि जो means था employment का that could not be differentiated, right? And agriculture, there are general tendency कि more agriculture development, qualitative change takes place in agriculture, more increase in unemployment. If differentiation does not take place in form of allied activities. तो हमारे यहाँ क्या हुआ है कि qualitative intervention हुआ, technology intervention हुआ, tractors, heavy mechanization and all, but failure in growth and development of allied activities. तो क्या हुआ? Poverty continues. Villages में getting your point. आप देखेंगे vertical growth कि जो big farmers है, landlords है, उसका growth हुआ, but the poor became poorer, right? वैसा ही industry, limited industrialization, economic differentiation could not take place. Heavy industrialization, not labor intensive, industrialization. heavy industrialization. In fact, after LPG, governments have receded from their responsibility of creating, employment opportunities through such intervention, right? आप देखेंगे LPG के बाद, right? Condition of labor-intensive intervention of the government to create employment. Socialist government in 70s, right? Congress government has opened many, stores, government stores, super bazaar, but post LPG super bazaar closed, right? This आपका ये दुकान है ना गवर्नमेंट का, केंद्रीय भंडार and all these were opened to create employment opportunities, but you see condition of केंद्रीय भंडार, super bazaars, isn't it? Because post LPG government, receded from, these areas, right, of employment creation, and responsibility was given to private sector, right? And what private sector did? Private sector outsourced the work, right, from formal to informal sector to minimize the cost of production or cost of service and maximize the profit, right? With outsourcing, contractualization, income, decline, or low income, isn't it? Pauperization continued. So low differentiation, industrialization come hua. Even if industrialization took place, so that like service industries ka expansion, but characterized by outsourcing, contractualization, low substantial increase in the wages, low substantial increase in, no substantial increase in income, right, of the masses. So poverty continued. तो एक factor मानते हैं कि low economic differentiation, right? Economic differentiation, agriculture to agriculture allied, right? And industry to services, right? But service ka growth with outsourcing by private sectors, and service ka growth, industry ka growth in hands of private sector. The private sector who are motivated for making maximum profit, to make maximum profit, they don't increase the wages substantially. They outsource the work, isn't it? From formal to informal sector, contractualization of work, and low income, low wealth, right? Low savings, right? एक और हाई इन्फ्लेशन को भी काउंट करते हैं. हाई इन्फ्लेशन, हाई प्राइस राइज, राइट? प्राइस राइज, इन्फ्लेशन देखिए, राइट? लगातार कंटिन्यूअसली we have seen rise in inflation. No, successive governments have failed in controlling inflation, और अब तो we have become inflation neutral, right? Society has become inflation neutral कि उनको फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता, right? जब पार्टी अपोजिशन में होती है तो कहते हैं कि we will control inflation, हम ये करेंगे वो. जब पार्टी पोजीशन में आती है तो they themselves right, see petrol ka prices and see diesel ka prices, right? So we people, the poor helpless people of India have become this inflation neutral, right? It is not of much concern, right? So these are the factors, causalities, causal factors which we count as factors of factors behind poverty, right?